All right, so you know how we usually talk about doctors and nurses as the backbone of healthcare?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out there's a whole lot more to it, especially in places like Australia where they have this two-tiered nursing system.
Right, right.
We're diving into the world of enrolled nurses today.
ENs.
ENs. They're these essential healthcare heroes supporting those registered nurses, the RNs.
Yeah.
And we're going to unpack what they do, the
Yeah.
challenges they're up against, and how this new assessment tool is trying to make things clearer for them.
Interesting. A new assessment tool specifically for ENs.
Yeah. This deep dive is all about this research article we found, and it's all centered around this new tool for assessing EN performance in Australia.
Okay, so what's the article called?
It's a bit of a mouthful, like most academic titles.
Right.
Learning in the workplace. Development of a simple language statement assessment tool that supports second-level nurse practice.
Catchy. But it sounds like it's really trying to get at this idea of like what exactly defines the EN role,
Yeah.
right? Because most people probably don't even realize there are different tiers of nurses.
That's so true. I mean, you've got your registered nurses, the RNs, who have that bachelor's degree.
Right.
But in Australia, you also have these enrolled nurses, ENs, and they have a specialized diploma.
Okay.
And they're registered and everything, making them like official members of the healthcare team.
Yeah.
But it sounds like their specific role can get a little, I don't know, lost sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because they have standards, like official standards for what ENs should be able to do.
Right.
But this research, it kind of highlights this gap between what's written down and how it actually plays out in the day-to-day.
Huh.
Like how those standards translate into actual tasks and expectations on the job.
So even though the ENs are working right alongside the RNs doing all this important work,
Yeah.
it's like their specific contributions can get a bit, I don't know.
Overlooked?
Yeah, like maybe people just lump them together as nurses and don't realize there are these different levels of expertise.
It's like, you know how in a recipe you need the right amount of flour and sugar? They both go in, they work together.
Yeah.
You wouldn't just use them interchangeably, right?
No, totally. You need both for the recipe to work. Okay, so that's where this new assessment tool comes in, right?
Yeah.
The ANSAT for ENs,
Which stands for...
Australian Nursing Standards Assessment Tool for Enrolled Nurses.
Okay, quite a mouthful.
I know, right? But hold on, before you think this is just another boring checklist for nurses, it's actually pretty cool.
Oh.
Yeah, they designed it so differently.
Ellie.
They got educators, supervisors, even nursing students all involved in creating it.
Wow.
They really wanted to ditch those vague descriptions and actually define what good EN practice looks like using like really specific examples.
So instead of just saying the EN needs good communication skills, it actually gives you like concrete situations.
That's exactly it. So like instead of just demonstrates good communication, it might say something like,
The EN clearly explains the patient's condition to family members.
Yes.
Answers their questions thoughtfully.
yes, something super specific like that. It's actually super helpful. It's like instead of just like wandering around hoping you're going in the right direction, you've got a map.
I dig that.
And get this, the researchers, when they started testing the ANSAT out in the field,
Yeah.
they stumbled upon something really interesting.
Oh, like what?
Remember we were talking about how unclear the EN role can be?
Right, yeah.
Well, they found that all the assessment items in the ANSAT, those 30 items, they actually clustered into 3 main areas of EN practice.
Really? So like natural groupings emerged.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like the data was telling them, hey, this is how EN work actually breaks down in the real world.
Fascinating. All right, you got to tell me about these 3 areas.
Okay, so area number 1, higher order thinking and problem solving. So it's stuff like, handling those tricky patient situations, working effectively with the RNs, being able to think on their feet and make decisions.
So not just following instructions, but like really using critical thinking skills.
Exactly.
Interesting. What's this second area?
Area number 2 was all about the routine daily activities of care.
Okay, so the hands-on stuff.
Yeah, like clinical procedures, keeping those patient records up to date, prioritizing their workload, all that good stuff.
Right. Makes sense. So that covers the thinking part and the doing
Yeah.
part. What's the third area?
Okay, this one I think is super interesting.
Oh.
They called it personal and social attributes.
Hmm.
So, all those qualities that make an EN not just competent, but like truly great at what they do.
Right, right.
Respect for patients and colleagues, cultural sensitivity, a real dedication to always learning and growing professionally.
Basically like being a good human on top of being a skilled nurse.
Exactly. And What gets me is that these three areas, the thinking, the doing, and the being, they're all connected.
It's
Yeah.
like they all work together to give us this bigger picture of what it actually means to do this complex, multifaceted job.
Right. It's not just one thing, it's everything.
Right. It's like we're not just looking at a list of ingredients anymore. We're actually getting the whole recipe. We
Exactly.
see how each part comes together to create, like in this case, amazing patient care.
Yeah. And you know what else is interesting?
What's that?
It's not just about clarifying the EN role for like outsiders. It's about empowering the ENs themselves.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like imagine being an EN and finally having this tool that actually gets it, you know?
Right.
A tool that recognizes their expertise.
Yeah, instead of feeling like, is what I'm doing good enough?
Yeah.
They can see it right there.
Absolutely. And speaking of seeing it, how do you think this clarity actually plays out in real life? Like what's the impact?
Well, for one thing, the researchers, they found that when educators and supervisors used the ANSAT,
Yeah.
they felt like they were actually able to give better feedback to the EN students.
Oh, interesting.
And the evaluations were more consistent, like everyone's on the same page.
Makes sense because if you're trying to help someone grow, you need a clear picture of where they're at.
Exactly. And it's not just the educators and supervisors. The EN students, the ones actually being assessed, they loved it too.
Really?
Yeah, they said it helped them understand their own role better, figure out their strengths and weaknesses,
Mm.
and actually track their progress.
So it's like having a roadmap, not just for what good EN practice looks like, but for their own career.
That's a great way to put it. And you know what happens when people feel like they're on the right track? Job satisfaction goes up.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's huge, especially in healthcare. When nurses are happy, everybody wins, the patients, the whole team.
Exactly. A happy nurse is a good nurse, right?
Right. And when ENs are well supported and confident,
Yeah.
they can focus on giving amazing patient care.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, it can also take some of the pressure off those RNs who are often juggling a million things. Totally. It's all connected. This ANSAT thing, it might seem like it's just about ENs, but it really has the potential to shake things up in a good way, you know?
Oh, for sure. Like we're talking about shifting the entire healthcare landscape. And speaking of shifts, one of the coolest things about the ANSAT is how it could change EN education and professional development in the future.
Oh, yeah, we haven't even touched on that yet. It's got to be about more than just assessment. So, where does education come into all of this?
Okay, so imagine this. EN education programs that are designed around the ANSAT.
Okay, so the curriculum is like directly aligned with those competencies in the tool.
Exactly. Students would graduate knowing exactly what's expected of
Oh,
them.
that makes so much sense. No more guesswork for new grads. They can just jump right in.
Exactly. And hospitals get these highly prepared ENs who are ready to hit the ground running.
It's a win-win.
Totally. But it goes even further than that. Let's say through their ANSAT assessments, an EN realizes they're really good at that higher order thinking and problem solving stuff.
Right.
They could use that information to specialize, like go into critical care or the ER.
Wow, so this tool doesn't just clarify their current role, it actually helps them shape their whole career path.
Exactly. By clearly defining these different areas of EN practice, the ANSAT gives them the power to advocate for their own development. It's pretty groundbreaking stuff.
It's amazing how one tool, this ANSAT, can impact so many different parts of healthcare.
It really is.
Like you said, shifting the entire landscape.
And, this research was about Australia, but this could be huge for healthcare everywhere.
That's true. Not just Australia. This kind of framework could help ENs all over.
Yeah, exactly.
So as we wrap up, what's your final thought for our listeners? Something to think about after the episode.
Here's a question. How could this clarity around ENs, like we're seeing with the ANSAT, how could that impact the quality of healthcare overall, especially with the staffing shortages?
That's a great question. Especially now, could understanding ENs better actually help with recruiting and keeping nurses?
It's possible. And could it even lead to new ways of doing healthcare that are more accessible, more efficient?
It's amazing to think this assessment tool could spark that kind of change.
It shows the power of being clear, recognizing people, and supporting everyone on the healthcare team.
Couldn't agree more. A big thanks to you for this deep dive into the world of ENs. It's been eye-opening.
My pleasure. It's been great discussing this with you.
And to everyone listening, keep those brains engaged, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.